Welcome to Circular Edinburgh's latest webinar. In today's webinar, we will be focusing on the opportunities for a green recovery for the City of Edinburgh. We will be joined today by three speakers, Dr Sarah Ivory and Kathy Casahaga from the University of Edinburgh, who will give an overview of the opportunities for the city to embark on a green recovery and how businesses can get involved. We will then be joined by Professor Derek Stewart from the James Hutton Institute. Derek will explain the benefits of circular economy and examples of local projects within the city. I will now welcome our first speaker, Dr Sarah Ivory from the University of Edinburgh.
So we talk about build back better and what that means, and there are a lot of different kind of phrases and slogans being kind of thrown around. So some people are talking about a nature-based recovery or a green and just recovery. There's a very interesting just transitions document coming out of the COP26 Universities group soon on what a just transition would look like, not just a low carbon transition. Green recovery, there we've got the purpose first economy. This is the idea that we need to rely on businesses who are actually putting purpose first. And we do a lot of work on that idea, purpose-led business. And the last one I wanted to mention there in the bottom left, if you haven't heard of it yet, is the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. We All, they call themselves. And there's a great book from Catherine Trebeck and Jeremy Williams called The Economics of Arrival. And what they're talking about is the fact that previously we started with this idea of, in the 60s in particular, and it was John F. Kennedy's economics advisor, started with this idea that what we need is growth. Growth is our aim. But no one said, okay, so growth is our aim in order to achieve what we want to achieve. But no one said, okay, but what happens when we arrive at where we want to be? And that's what this book's about. This book's saying, for Western wealthy countries, we have arrived. So what does the economics of arrival look like? And I would argue that the economics of arrival will look a lot like, will have a lot of elements of the circular economy in it, and also of businesses working much more closely with other stakeholders, including the councils and including universities, in order to make those solutions happen. So I'm going to pass over to Dr. Kathy Casahaga. She is our Director of Research, and her area of expertise is the circular economy. And we look forward to hearing from you, Kathy.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was a great introduction. Thank you very much. So thanks and hello, everyone. Good morning. Good to see you all join this morning. This couldn't be more timely given the recent changes we've seen in our socioeconomic system. I'm calling this morning from Germany, where I am working from at the moment, because I am officially now on sabbatical. So hopefully you have heard some good things happening from here. So we're doing okay with COVID. But what we actually have seen, I think, with COVID is that we have a problem with climate change. And we've seen for many years, or we've known for many years, that climate change is happening. And scientists have revealed around 30 years ago that an increase in sea level, temperature, and storm events is due to our behavior and our CO2 emissions. But what we've seen through COVID is that some of these changes that we've experienced under climate change are accelerating, and that we haven't really decided, even though we have amazing targets on how to limit our emissions, that we haven't decided how to do that. And that COVID had also shown that even though we have these targets, we haven't really done enough, and we haven't really changed our behavior. And so if we see these pictures here of Greta Thunberg, then what we see is that COVID has revealed that some of these targets that we have developed haven't changed our behavior, and that we're still attached to overconsumption and economic growth mainly in our behavior. And so what we really see is that we don't really know how much we trust science. We're not really sure how much we are willing to give up. And that even though we've talked about it really fashionably about climate change the last 2 years, it's become really an issue of the newspaper and amongst young people and social media, that actually, even though we talk about all this, our behavior is still the same, and we haven't decided how much we trust science, how much we are willing to give up from our own freedom. And so if we see some of these pictures on our favorite newspapers of complete opposition between wanting to protect the climate, environmental protection, overconsumption and wanting to perhaps aim for economic growth at the same time, what we really see of these oppositions is that we haven't decided what of these things do we value more, and that really we need to discuss on political, economic, social, and legal levels what we really value and what we believe to be true, and how much we're willing to invest from our own time and from our own behaviors. So what does that mean, or what does that mean from our perspective? Well, we think that we really need to consider and redefine what we value of these things. So how much are we willing to give up? And if we look and look towards COVID and across the world, and how much people have to really renegotiate their resources and reshape their economic systems, we have to really decide what we value more and how we want to redefine our socioeconomic system. So who makes decisions? What are the organizing binaries? What are the decision levels that we have designed over the past? And some of this we have seen, or we are currently seeing in our research across Central and Latin America. So if you want to talk about that a bit more later in the Q&A sessions, but I just want to highlight that we are seeing some of those socioeconomic systems shift. So people who are normally making decisions on their own in businesses or in governments are suddenly bringing in other people to make better decisions. So not just product designers, but also young people and people from their communities. And we're realizing that people who are decision makers in government are also at the same time community members. So why can they not bring in some of their community ideas into those decision levels and make better decisions? So really what we're trying to think and argue in this short presentation is that how can we bring different people from different organizations, ages, backgrounds, and structures together in new ways and new structures. And so I've got 3 examples of how we've done that in the past, and I'm sure you have done that as well in the past within your own organizations and product development and things like that. But we've got these 3 examples because we want to show how we can perhaps do that a bit more in the next couple of years, and not just have those example projects that we sometimes do and we work really well together with businesses and city level decision makers and public sector organizations, for example, but how we can do that more often. So I've got 3 examples that I'll show you, but also 3 different ways of how you basically, by just getting in touch with us, can get involved in that directly, and so we can perhaps shape decisions that are based on better values and different kind of thinking. So the first idea that we have is, the first way that we've done this before is to bring different stakeholders together. So that normally involves us as a university, so academics, businesses, this could be you, and public sector organization or interest groups. So the example on the bottom is one that we've done with Copenhagen. So Copenhagen as a city and Copenhagen Business School over a period of 3 years, which was funded by the European Union. And it also involved community level decision makers, city level decision makers from Edinburgh City Council, Transport for Edinburgh, Copenhagen City, and some of their stakeholders, but also our students, and then, for example, Sarah and I. And what we did is that we tackled some of the problems that Edinburgh had in terms of their transport and their CO2 emissions. And we transferred some of the lessons that we had from Copenhagen to Edinburgh. And that was mainly done by our students. And now you might think, well, that's great that we're doing that, and then nobody looks at it again. But actually over this 3 years, some amazing reports were developed and some interesting posters, for example, with some of those findings were brought together, and it was based on real data, real outreach with community members and city level decision makers. And so later on, Edinburgh City Council, for example, used some of these materials in their later discussions and with their CEOs and also their annual meetings. So some of this stuff really makes decisions better and it gets used. So what would be your next step? Well, your next step would be to get in touch with Sarah and I, and this kind of stuff normally is really important to get some funding. So we could target, for example, together with businesses and public sector organizations, some of those funding calls that are going to come up, and I think Derek is going to mention some of them. So that would be your next step of how to get involved, and that's just one example of what we did. Another example is much more immediate, how you can get involved straight away. is every year we work with public and private sector organizations, for example, the Green Investment Group, Transport for Edinburgh, Edinburgh City Council, Costain, for example, a big infrastructure company headquartered in London. And some of these companies come to us with real problems, and then the students get matched with these companies from end of December to end of April and work on these problems. And what you get in the end is an amazing consulting report and some really first-hand data and really rigorous analysis without having to transfer any payment. So it's free work, but the amazing stuff for us or for our students is they get to work with you. And again, here, some of these, the things that the students have developed over the last 6-7 years gets used in research later on and gets published on companies' websites. So it makes decisions a lot better. So it's not any effort in ideas that get lost, but actually benefit you and your business as well. So that's something you can get involved with straight away, because we are just getting in touch again with all these organizations that we worked with before, and we're just signing the agreements at the moment. So if you're interested in that, it's amazing work that gets delivered there. And then the final, a bit more tricky thing that we've done in the past is to get really big private sector money or public sector money and work with organizations. And this one example I have here is one that was funded over a period of 3 years by Volvo Construction Challenge, which is a fund that gets made available from Volvo Construction, the company, and it's private sector money. And we applied for it together with Costain, which is a large infrastructure company that I mentioned before. And in the end, what we developed on the back of that money is that we developed software for the company and for the industry, but also it funded for us, a PhD student, and it, in the end, got published in international journals across the world. So here's a link towards that. Now that's a bit more tricky, because these things, you have to have a very specific funding call. You have to come up with a really good proposal. But why it works and why it's amazing is you can come with a real challenge, and us as academics, we will support you with that challenge. And the only tricky bit is that you have to write quite an academic proposal, but that gets done together as well. And some of these outlooks we can target as, for example, Innovate UK. For you guys, Volvo Construction Challenge runs every other year. I probably won't be able to apply again, but Sarah probably will. And then there's the ESRC, Economic Social Research Council, and other funding opportunities as well. But I know Derek again will mention some of these again. But so one of the things that I want to say to you, if you have something that you're interested in that might be a little bit academic but is mainly very practical, get in touch with Sarah and I, and we can target together some very specific funding calls. So we can also see right now that these calls from ESRC or Innovate UK, they are much more targeted these days, not just on academic institutions, but really on your businesses, and that's where the money goes and flows. So if you have good ideas, if you have real world challenges, then we can tackle these together, and we can tackle some of these grand calls. So that's basically what we wanted to say today, Sarah and I. And Sarah, you can add something if you want. I know your microphone is still on. So just to give you an idea of where we see some of these challenges. So we see the challenge is that we are a lot more fragmented than what climate change needs, and that what COVID-19 needs, and that actually we need to come together much more as a unique new we. And so we would like to do that with you, and we've seen that in the past that works, and we're also seeing that across the world right now. So if you have something that you want us to tackle with you together, we'd be happy to do that for you.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Sarah. That was great. That was really interesting, and also to see how companies can get involved with the different projects the university are holding. So that was really, really interesting. Thanks so much. I'm now going to pass you over to Professor Derek Stewart from the James Hutton Institute. Over to you, Derek.
Okay, right. We all seeing the big screen?
Yes.
Okay, morning everyone. So I think as Kathy and Sarah have shown, Circular economy is a bit of a nebulous concept, and people get lost as to where they fit in it. And when you throw climate change into the mix as well, people think, well, I don't know what to do. We originally thought that actually sifting out rubbish and putting the tins in one bin and the tatty peelings in the other, that's it, we solve climate change. What can we do now? It's a wee bit more complex than that. And exactly as Kathy said, I think the consequences of our resource use means climate change is increasing, and it's evidence-based. And I would stress evidence-based, given what's coming out of UK government lately. Evidence-based is what you base your decisions on. If it's not, it becomes a faith-based thing. However, circular economy is not that. So I'm going to talk to you today about aspects of circular economy, real-life projects that are happening, and how they may, how your businesses may then pick up that concept and run with it. So we are moving from what is a linear economy. The post-war boom was make more things, sell more things, vibrant economy. That was fine in the short term, where we took the resources, made the products, and then threw them away. Now we're realizing actually that's maybe not such a great idea with greenhouse gases, poisoning of the environment. We need to start looking at where we can start to recycle things, reuse resources, rather than just, we don't have an infinite resource. So we're shifting to a circular economy where we can try and take wastes in all formats from products and use them for something else. Can we then reuse the products? Can we remake them? Can we restyle them? And actually, some of the ones you think would be the worst industries are actually quite good at this. So if you look at the car industry, their circular economy is actually spectacularly good in car build. The fuel's maybe not the best idea, but the build itself is actually really good. So we can take some concepts from that. And certainly things like the EU have adopted this significantly with their strategies and plans. And Scottish Government are particularly forward thinking, having developed a circular economy strategy, and hopefully will legislate next year. It's supposed to be this year, but COVID has knocked that back like everything else. And so this is a nice diagram as to how it fits. So can you see my cursor moving around on screen? Yeah, good. So you've got your product here, and the cycle is you'll make your product, put it into packaging, it gets transported, it gets used. But actually at every point, there's different ways where you can recycle, remanufacture, reuse, repair, and share. I'm sure they were desperate for another R starting word for share, but clearly couldn't get one. So that's still a big concept. I usually find when I'm speaking to businesses, they go, well, show me how someone's done it. Right. So here's ones we've been involved in. A couple of young guys, or early career businessmen in Glasgow, they clearly saw that there was a lot of coffee shops on the go. And when you go to a coffee shop, you really start to see the amount of coffee grains that are just taken out of the machine, battered into that bin underneath, and then essentially they get binned. A bit of background reading by them and interaction with us identified that actually there's a lot of essential oils in those waste spent coffee grains. So you can see here what we've done is establish an extraction process where they can create cosmetic grade oils from waste coffee grains. However, that still leaves the coffee grains that you've extracted the oil from. So what we're now doing is looking at that as soil conditioning material that can then go into soils, particularly in home B&Q type enterprises. So from what was essentially something that was going to landfill, they've got two products. One that's okay value, that one extremely good value. Just through a bit of, instead of thinking actually in a linear manner, you think left field, or right field actually there. So at the other end of the scale, straw in all its formats is a massive renewable resource. And in this case, it could be wood as well. Through innovative chemistries, we can crack it down and create ethylene glycol, and that's a key component into PET, polyethylene terephthalate, one of the most prevalent plastics we use. I'll say now, we'll never get rid of plastics we'll never get rid of plastic use. It's too ubiquitous now, and our whole lives depend on it. I can guarantee now you're all looking at the screen that's got a plastic fascia around the front of it. You've got a webcam that's plastic. If you didn't have plastic, we'd be speaking with 2 tins or a lot of tins and a lot of string like that. So what we need to do is change the plastic infrastructure, renewable resources at the start, good recycling at the end. That's happening. But if we create renewable resources for plastics, we can start to recreate all these products. And actually that plastic PET itself can be recycled and remanufactured several times before it becomes too degraded. One that's completely on message at the moment is one project that I've just started with a Fife company funded by Innovate UK. Because of the work we were doing, we were sort of in the area of bioactives, sustainable materials, and we saw an opportunity here, particularly as you wander about now, any street, you'll see masks are just strewn all over the place. People don't bin them particularly well, and actually they tend to be single use. I think they're actually designed to be single use, because my gut feeling is that bit that goes around the ear pops off quite quickly. So someone's calculated, it's in Imperial College I think, that if everyone uses a single mask each day for a year, and they're single use and then bin, that's 66,000 tonnes of plastic going down. If you do the greenhouse gas equivalent exchange for that, it's enormous. So what we aim to do is to develop non-single use masks and ones that can be reused multiple times. So currently what happens is you've got the fossil non-renewable resources. They're used, go into the plastics infrastructure and create single-use masks. What we're looking at is organic wastes, plant waste, and inorganic wastes, and developing masks that can be washed repeatedly, but still maintain bioactivity. At the minute, our initial results are showing we've got a 100% COVID kill with our masks. Interestingly, when I chatted to a guy about the project, it's not even started, we're just signing the contract with Innovate UK. When I chatted to one of my friends who runs a lot of care homes, he emailed me the next day and said, right, me and my mates want to invest in this. How do we go ahead? So the circular economy can make money. It's worth bearing in mind. So that's a few examples. And obviously, because I'm from an agri-plant chemistry background, my work tends to focus on that, but the concepts can be broader. So you've got a whole raft of wastes there on the screen. And there's different value chains you can put your wastes or co-products into. It can be as simple as burning it, combined heat and power systems. They're incredibly efficient and they can supplement your energy use in your business. Animal feed, that's the most traditional of all circular economies. Farmers have been doing it for thousands of years. Or we can crack complex molecules in plant systems down to single molecules. So there's lots of industrial biotech companies around the central belt in Scotland, and their biggest resource past energy, beyond energy, is glucose, because they have to feed the bugs, and those bugs are then making complex molecules. The glucose is usually imported from abroad, but we can crack things down. So I think there's about 80,000 tonnes of waste bread a year. Or you've got sandwich companies like Breaks, they'll make a lot of sandwiches, but a lot of the time they'll cut the crusts off. You can take those crusts, crack them back down to glucose. That glucose can be a feedstock. So it's almost like a game of, someone described it as kerplunk. You move one thing and the game changes around you, but you have to think a bit more laterally. And this is where people like myself, Kathy and Sarah come into it. A lot of the area I'm working on at the moment is the medium to high value change for crop-based wastes, particularly if there's soft fruit that doesn't hit the pretty soft fruit that Tesco's, Asda and Lidl's want. So those ones that don't get sold, they're actually really valuable chemical resources. We extract the colours out, stabilise them, and they can go back into processed foods as natural colourants. And we definitely want to get rid of standard E numbers, the synthetic-based colourants, so there's immediate home there. Or we can take these, some of the colourless chemicals, put them into processed meat products. It stops rancidity and extends the shelf life of the product for a week. And again, that's absolute circular economy at work there. The waste that people tend to forget about is heat and CO2 because it's invisible. And certainly I would imagine any of you that's got a business there will be leaking heat at a vast rate in CO2. So the interesting concept we're working with there is trying to co-locate people that have excess heat and CO2 with businesses that can take them. Now the easiest one is actually producing crops through horticulture. And what that is tending to do is give generally the business that's producing the waste a revenue that they can then recover energy costs on. In your region, you've got multiple people. I think we've got some here. I think John's there and he's from Move On. I had a quick look on Google actually when I saw the face, I thought I recognised them. So you've got several companies there that are working in the circular economy area, whether it's looking at reducing landfill, reusing that, better uses for wood, reusing and sharing tools. That's an interesting one, that one. And then you've got perhaps some of the bigger ones. Kenetech, they're looking at recycling construction waste into bricks. And Celtic Renewables, who I've known for years, who are using waste agricultural material to create new fuels or solvents like acetone, butanol, and ethanol. And interestingly, they're recycling the concept because the process they're basing it on was created in 1890. So it's not just the products, it's the processes as well. If you want to do all that, it's going to cost you time, resources, and money. But there are programs out there that will allow you to access money to do these things. Now, I did a shotgun approach to this and picked a few out. So there's a whole range of ones there that can either be very specific or very broad. Interestingly, the ones we find are very useful are certainly the new ones, the Sustainable Innovation Fund and Innovate UK. They basically have got they're not targeted at all, they're very broad. But it's worth taking advice from someone who works in this area to have a look before you go into these. And in fact, contact Innovate UK. I would say for most of the Innovate UK projects, I'm a reviewer for most of them as well, and have been funded by different rounds on them. So I'm an old hand at this and happy to help along the line. So if you've got an idea, contact us. We'll hold your hand through the process and see if we can get someone else to pay for what you want to do, at least partially. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a feel for how circular economy works at the ground level and will allow your business to flourish.
It's just I want to highlight the support that we offer for businesses from Circular Edinburgh and for Zero Waste Scotland. So just to let you know that we offer advice and support to help your company turn waste into wealth. We also offer circular economy assessments. We can help with support and advice to help you develop a project, and also put you in touch with people like Derek and Kathy and Sarah. We've got a lot of networks and contacts that we can put you in. And we can also refer you on to Zero Waste Scotland Circular Economy Business Support Service. They offer up to £10,000 worth of consulting support. And they also have an energy efficiency business support service. And also, as Derek explained, we also have informational funding options. So that's Innovate UK or the Circular Economy Investment Fund. So we will get in touch with yourselves and all the delegates who can attend today just to follow up. If you want any other meetings, we can follow up with you afterwards. So Lauren and myself will follow up. Just before we go to Q&A, Lauren, if you don't mind just coming out of sharing screen, please, that'd be great. I'm just going to pass you over to my colleague, Joanne Davidson, who is Director of Policy at the Edinburgh Chamber of Commerce. Jo's just going to cover a little bit about a project she's heading up, which is the Canby project. So over to you, Jo.
Thanks, Marianne. Morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to gatecrash your event this morning and just take the next 5 minutes just to talk a little bit about an initiative that the Edinburgh Chamber of Commerce has been leading on called Edinburgh Can Be. As Marianne has said, I'm Jo Davidson. I'm the Director of Policy at the Edinburgh Chamber, so I am responsible for leading on all of our policy work, but particularly I've been involved in Edinburgh Can Be as an initiative, one of the strategic initiatives that the Chamber is engaged with, and I wanted to talk to you a bit about it today simply because I think that there are lots of linkages, there's lots of resonance in what we're trying to do with Edinburgh Can Be that fit in with the subject matter today and actually fit in with many of the things that the speakers we've heard from today have already covered off. So to start with, what is Edinburgh Can Be? Well, essentially, Edinburgh Can Be is a movement, and we use the term movement. I know that's one of those terms that kind of makes people roll their eyes a little, but we feel that that's really the most appropriate way to describe Can Be. It's not really an initiative. It's not really a project. It's more of a movement, and it's one which connects cross-city sector leadership in order to accelerate and amplify our collective impact in addressing Edinburgh's priority economic, social and environmental challenges, helping to use business as a force for good. So it essentially exists so that all of the stakeholders of the city can participate collaboratively in its sustainable development. And I think this harks back quite significantly to some of the things that Sarah was talking about in her introduction around lots of different stakeholders across the city coming together to work collectively and work differently to achieve an overall aim. So what does that essentially mean? Well, essentially it means that we want to gather as many organisations from across the city of all sizes, scales and sectors, public sector, private sector, not-for-profits or social enterprises, to come together to help capture, measure and improve our collective impact, principally against the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And also, actually, I should add, obviously, as a Chamber of Commerce, we've been leading in the business engagement element of this and pulling together some of the key stakeholders, given our role as civic leaders in the city, but also citizen voices are very, very important and can be, and we are making sure that the citizen voice will be represented and is being represented in the work that we do, and in fact has been to date for reasons I'll explain, and how we've sort of tried to tackle some of the issues that we as a city face. So just if I can take you back just very, very briefly, just to sort of contextualise this for you. So for us at the Chamber of Commerce, this journey started about 18 months ago. We have one of our policy groups is called the Inspiring Communities Group. Some of you may be familiar with that. And that group became aware of and became connected to an organisation called Scotland Can Be. So Scotland Can Be was funded by the Scottish Government as part of its work, as you'll all be aware, to and signing up and committing to achieving the SDGs and aligning Scotland's national performance framework to them. So through our engagement with Scotland Can Be, we became aware of a global organisation called Cities Can Be. Sorry, I know this is very confusing, but it will make sense, which takes that countrywide Can Be concept to a city level. So that's a movement of cities that are working to be increasingly more prosperous, sustainable, inclusive and resilient. And it involves facing the global challenges embodied in the SDGs, but acting on them locally. So responding to the most relevant issues that are faced in each city. So working with Scotland Can Be and other key partners across the city, including Napier University, the SDG Network, we worked with City of Edinburgh Council, with the University of Edinburgh and various stakeholders across the city. We bid for support to become a City Can Be, to join the existing network of cities that were working on this, which included Mendoza, Rio de Janeiro and Santiago. And I was very interested in what Kathy said earlier about how well Central and South America seem to be bringing these new models and structures together to create impact. And I'm not sure if there's a link there, but certainly this movement has been focused pretty much on Central and South American cities. So we bid for some support, and alongside Barcelona, Cordoba in Argentina and Asunción in Paraguay, we were successful in gaining that support, which was funded by the BMW organisation. And we essentially have become one of only 2 non-South American cities in the world who are working on this at a city level. So through ongoing engagement with key city stakeholders and using, as I mentioned, the involvement of citizens, we were actually very fortunate. The City of Edinburgh Council, who are one of our partners, gave us access to a massive piece of research they had done with citizens as part of their work to shape the City Vision 2050. We got access to that data, we did some stakeholder sessions, and we tried to distill down what we felt the priorities were for Edinburgh as a city in relation to the SDGs, and we identified 5 key areas. So those were inequality and homelessness, environmental sustainability, so hence the engagement with Circular Edinburgh, the future of work, regeneration and power, and healthy ageing. Now, I should caveat, this was obviously pre-COVID, but frankly, I'm not sure that we would change those at the moment. I think those issues still exist. And I think that, you know, those are still important issues for the city that, if anything, in some areas may only have been exacerbated by what we've all gone through over the course of the last few months. So you can see, hopefully now it makes sense why Mayan had invited me kindly to speak to you today, because there are absolute parallels with a lot of the things that have been discussed on the call this morning, and particularly with the Circular Edinburgh initiative, that we want to help us in the work that we are doing as part of Edinburgh Can Be, and to help to measure impact. And one of the key things, one of the key drivers behind the Chamber's involvement in this is not just about the ability as we rebuild to measure impact and to build back better, but also to highlight some of the amazing things that we know that organisations in our city are actually already doing. But probably people aren't aware of it, and if they are aware of it, they're not aware of the impact that it has. So what we're trying to do is help to measure that impact and to embed some of the SDG principles into the work that our businesses are doing across the city. So the purpose of me being here today really was just to sort of introduce this concept to you. We're at the very, very beginning stages of the engagement. It's taken us quite a bit of time, and COVID derailed us a little, as you can imagine, in terms of trying to understand exactly what the ask is and exactly what the purpose of the movement is and how we want to engage with people. We're finalising that now. And we're in a position now where we want to come out and start speaking to people about it. And the purpose really of today really is just for me to introduce the concept to those of you who aren't aware of it, and to invite you, if you are interested in hearing and knowing more and getting engaged and involved in what we're doing on CanBe, if you can please get in touch with us. So we have a policy mailbox set up at the Chamber. I'll make sure that Lauren in any post-com sends this out to everyone, but that's policy@edinburghchamber.co.uk. Please, if you're interested, drop us a note to that email address, and we'll engage with you. It's you'll have to be with us because we're obviously still at some of the beginning work of this, but that's actually great because it means that those who start to get involved now can help to shape some of the work that we do. There is no prescriptive way to do this, and in the work that we've been doing with the cities who've already done it, they've each taken very different methodologies about how they go about doing it. So there's an opportunity to shape, but really this is about measuring impact across our city, highlighting some of the great work we know that we're already doing, and helping our organisations to do even more of that so we can make an effective and sustainable impact as we move forward. So that's all I wanted to say this morning. Thanks again for your attention.
Great, thanks, Jo. As I said, we'll follow up, so if you want to get involved, then just let us know, and we'll pass you on the contact details. So now we've got some time for the Q&A. I don't know if anybody wants to ask some questions to the panel. We've got about just under 15 minutes for a Q&A. So I was just wondering, either in the chat box or if you just want to put your camera on, is there any questions to the panel?
May I ask a question?
Yeah, hi Benjamin, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. There's a tendency to see the SDGs as something relevant for the global south and not really relevant for lovely cities like Edinburgh. So it's really great to see Edinburgh taking a leadership position and sort of recognising the SDGs are also relevant here. And particularly during COVID, it's definitely true. But I'm wondering, I think the Scottish Government does recognise the relevance of the SDGs, and this is very much part of their national performance framework. But do you think that, apart from those organisations that are on this call today, do you think that there is a change in approach and perception from the private sector, and are companies recognising that the SDGs are relevant for everyone, and particularly in the private sector in Edinburgh? Are you taking all the businesses with you in the Chamber just now?
Jo, do you want to maybe try and answer that one?
Sure, no problem. Hi, Benjamin. I know we've had conversations before. I think the larger organisations, yes, it's part of their language, and in fact, one of the reasons that attracted us to the CanBe initiative was that it was a way of speaking to those organisations in a way that they already understood, because many of them were already working in that space. And among the smaller organisations, being honest with you, no, probably not, but that's in some sense why we as a movement exist and want to try to encourage and engage, because that we know that there are ways for even smaller organisations to engage, and in some ways the CanBe movement, because it is at that city level, allows that engagement in a way that is accessible to smaller organisations, because they can measure the impact of their own organisation, and also they can see the impact at a local level and a city level, as opposed to on a national level or a global level, where maybe they feel like they can't in any way contribute or make any impact. So it's about part of Edinburgh CanBe is about bringing that down to the city level, where that impact can be physically seen and experienced by those organisations in that locality. So that is, and we're at the very beginning, as I said, the very beginning stage of that journey. So, that's one of the things that we want to try and do, and one of the first phases of work that we will do is about doing things like this and raising visibility and awareness and making it relevant to those types of organisations in a way that maybe they haven't felt it has been relevant up until now. And we'll use the larger organisations to do that. So a lot of the larger organisations that already are engaged in the SDG, in the language of the SDGs, have supply chains made up of smaller organisations. So again, it's about using all of those tools, using the network. It's not about us as a chamber saying to people, this is what you must do. Eventually, it will be about all of the members of the movement coming together to say to all of their networks, this is what we're doing, how can you get involved and as well. So it's about that ownership rather than the sort of dictatorial, here is what you must do approach, and that's how we intend to move it forward. So yeah, it's definitely, we know we have some work to do when it comes to the smaller organisations.
I think also what you said, Joe, was also about showcasing what's currently being done. So a lot of SMEs are doing some great work, but that's not necessarily being seen as, you know, meeting an SDG, but actually
exactly.
they're doing this. It's also about showcasing. Yes. I think that's what you said as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks, Joe. Do we have any other questions? Any other questions?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course, Julian, go ahead.
Thanks. We're a travel company, so at the moment we're probably one of the greenest industries in the world because not many people are flying anywhere. However, at some point it will start coming back, and certainly as a company, we're just a small company, you know, 7 people, but we're quite keen to sort of try and if you like, use the time that we've got at the moment to really set ourselves up in a green way, you know, in a green outlook, environmental outlook for clients and, you know, customers. And I don't know, you know, it seems a bit daunting for us to look at that, you know, so I don't know through this whether, you know, we can get help to sort of try and, if you like, relay our foundations on a more environmental sort of thing. And we'd be keen to sort of find out how we could do that, you know. But from our side, cost is a big thing at the moment because we've lost a year's worth of income by the time this all comes, if not more, you know. So it is a frugal sort of time for us, but we're keen to use it so that when it all comes back, travel, whenever that is, that we can relaunch ourselves in a more environmental green light, if you like.
I mean, that's what Circular Edinburgh is all about. So that's what we can do is help you. There shouldn't be a cost implication. You know, we deal with SMEs. That's who our target market. So we don't expect companies to try and start launching initiatives that cost any money. It's just about looking at operations. So what we'll do, Julian, is we'll get in touch offline and arrange a meeting for us to try and start helping you. That's what our aim is. So we will get in touch to help you with that. That's not a problem. People think, you know, the whole point about circular economy is that it should either save you money or make you money. It's also about the bottom line. It's not that it should be a cost implication for you to start launching sustainability initiatives. It's just about looking within your company. So we'll get in touch and help you with that. That's not a problem. And that's what Circular Edinburgh is all about and the Chamber is all about. It's about helping you as a member. So we can do that. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, hi, it's Graham Hill here from Barclays.
Hi, Graham. Go on.
Hi there. Yeah, thanks very much for the presentations. Really interesting, and yeah, definitely struck by this need to work together. You know, that no one organisation has the answer, and it's very much a team game. And just on that, thinking about the Scottish Government and their programme for government recently issued, and their funding commitment to the Scottish National Investment Bank, I just wondered, you know, listening to Kathy, Sarah, and to Derek, just the amount of effort and work that goes into these individual funding applications to bit by bit kind of move the boulder up the hill, it feels sometimes. And I just wondered, is there perhaps an opportunity with that $3 billion investment to kind of change the way we approach these things? Because, you know, in a sense, it shouldn't really be a competition to win funding. It should be more about, we have a collective challenge here, and how could we could put the shoulder of government behind it in a more structured way, because we kind of understand you know, what our expertise is in Scotland quite well, and it's about attracting those behind the project, not spending lots of time doing funding applications. So just have reflections on that as an idea of doing things a little bit differently.
Derek, do you want to maybe try and?
Yeah, I know certainly the Scottish Government have been pooling, as in brigading, inputs with regard to Green Deal and circular economy, with a view to having a much more rational strategy on how to embed it. I think that the competition element will always be in there, Graham, because you think realistically you want, it's actually maybe going back to earlier, that it's the balance between environment and economy. They are always going to be in conflict, really. And I think what they want to do is get the best of both worlds, and competition is the easiest way to do that. I think one of the avenues that I'm not convinced I've seen operated or work well is actually using your local authority abilities, because they have prescribed rules that they have to use, for example, resources within a defined area. So if you start to make sure they have to hit defined recycle targets, reuse targets, carbon credit targets, whatever you want, they've got financial muscle that they can use, and they can actually spend within their defined area. And once that concept gets embedded and down there, you'll start to see, actually, I don't just have to do it within that area or the business. That business can then work across Scotland or internationally. So there's multiple different levers and buttons can be pressed by government. But again, ultimately, I would go back to what I said right at the start. I'm not convinced people understand circular economy and climate change well. It's too big a concept to get people's heads around very often. I mean, I get bored of it, to be honest. I work in the area. and it can become very polarized. So people will say, oh, it's agriculture and livestock, stop that and we'll be fine. No, I'm not convinced. People say it's transport. It's the whole system. And once you get to the whole system, if you make a small percentage change, it's actually quite significant, but it involves everyone to work together. And I think that's the sort of thing Scottish Government needs, transformational change. One thing they are doing, I suppose, on that is looking at how we get our energy. I mean, they've done very well on that, renewable energy. And I think if they can take the thinking on that and embed that into circular economy, that might work. I'll let Kathy jump in.
Kathy, is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, Graham, thanks for that question. That is a tricky question, and it's a valid question as well. So what I think is important is to, in the first instance, is just to go for some of these funding calls. So we're quite good at the centre to go for these funding calls. So we have, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, have a number of really big grants. And I think the most important thing is to just get going and just submit them, because they do take a lot of work. But then once you get the hang of it, it suddenly becomes a lot easier. So if you've done 1 or 2 quite well, you know how to do them. So I think that's the thing, but that doesn't answer your question. You're saying, fundamentally we're doing something wrong here because it's about competition. I do agree with that, but I think for right now, we have to just deal with what we're given. And if that's the setup of the government, and especially the national government, that's where the funding comes from, then we have to play along with it. However, some of these things you can target in some of your proposals. So you can say fundamentally, the idea that we're doing this is wrong. And especially that works well with some of the bigger funding calls that we've been involved with, especially if they are over a number of cities. You are quite able to involve a few different stakeholders so that everyone can benefit. So it's not just you, Graham, who was involved with the proposal, for example, that benefits from this grant, but actually all the different businesses that are set in Edinburgh could dial into this hub that, for example, will be set up under certain grants or certain successful proposals. So I think that's the way to set them up. So basically that if you do go for a call, come away from that mindset, it's just for you or just for me to benefit, but actually it's just, if I benefit, everyone around me should benefit too. So I think that's kind of how we set up the calls or the proposals that we create. It's not us benefiting, it's always us benefiting because it's work for us, but actually everyone should be able to target it and to tap into some of the resources that we create if it's like a year's or 3 years project. So I think that's the way to think about it. But right now we can't really do it differently, I think.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Kathy. We've got time for one last question. Is there anybody else? Yeah, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, hi, it's Colin Smith. I'm the Chief Executive at the Scottish Wholesale Association. Just interested to hear everyone's comments. And Kathy, I'd maybe like to pick up with you offline. Our membership is made up of all the food and drink wholesalers. So Derek mentioned Breaks earlier and their sandwiches. They're one of our members, as is Bid Food, Breaks, Costco, the local Fealties, JW Fuel Cell, etc. So our members are the wheels, literally, to the food and drink industry, servicing all the restaurants, pubs, clubs, convenience stores, etc. What we are looking to do, or we've already started it, is put a project together as to how we could collectively decarbonise the wholesale industry, and starting to look at the fleet. And I spoke to Kathy. I don't know if you're friends or you know with Katrin Caitlin. She did a project with Edinburgh Uni on hydrogen fuel and fleets, etc. And I was actually speaking with her yesterday. It would be good to tie in and see what funding is available to start and look at those projects, and start and feed through to the council, the Edinburgh Council, Glasgow Council, etc. And where hydrogen fuel can be used within the private sector, because I know it's already used public sector transport, the buses, etc. But there's a huge opportunity, and hopefully as an association we can be the first to take a whole industry forward and look at not repurposing our vehicles, but making them greener, using either hydrogen or electric. But there's a huge amount of investment required. Graham had mentioned SNIB. That's certainly something we'd be interested in speaking to them. We've already spoken to Benny Higgins on some other project work, but yeah, it's really just to make everyone aware that this is something that we're doing as an industry, and a bit like Joanne was saying, pulling people together, and having the small ones as well as the large ones, and doing it as an industry as opposed to people trying to do things individually.
Great. Is that okay, Kathy? I think I'll let you both maybe follow up offline if that's okay. We're just
yep.
I'm conscious of time, so I think what we'll do is we'll bring the webinar to a close. First, I want to thank all our speakers, Sarah, Kathy, Derek, Joe. Thank you for your time this morning. That was really enlightening. As I explained, Lauren and I will follow up. We'll share the presentations from the speakers. We'll also share the recording of the webinar. And also, as a few have said, if anybody wants follow-up meetings, we can arrange that to support you with Circular Edinburgh, but also to pipeline you if there's any other information that you're looking for example. Thanks again for your time this morning. I hope you found that of value. And as I said, if you want to get in touch with us, obviously just get in touch with us. We'll follow up. Lauren will be in touch. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks again for your time. Thank you.